My name is Beth Wilensky. I teach legal practice here at Michigan. I've been doing it for 18 years now. So legal practice is the class that pulls together all of the things that students learn in law school and teaches you, the students, how lawyers actually work with that material. It's the very practical class that teaches, what you do when a client comes to you with a legal problem. How do you research it? How do you strategize and think about it? And most importantly, how do you write about it? Because for the vast majority of lawyers, the vast majority of the work they do or the work they produce is in writing. So it is a very writing-intensive class where you're going to get lots of individualized feedback on the work that you produce. Incoming law students, I think, roughly divide into two categories with respect to their own assessment of their writing skills. We always have students who come in feeling pretty confident in their writing. We also have plenty of students who come in who don't feel confident at all in their writing. And legal practice is gonna be great for students who fall into both categories. So first of all, even for students who already have been successful writers in other environments, when we give you legal stuff to work with and say, now let's engage in legal analysis on paper, your foundational writing skills will serve you well, but so much of what we do when we do legal writing is substantively quite different than what the vast majority of our students have done in other environments. So there is still plenty to learn. And even aside from that, I, as somebody who, I've been teaching this class for 18 years, I practiced law before that for about 5 years. I still find that I have plenty to learn about legal writing. And so the process of learning what great writing is and how to produce it is a lifelong process. And then for the students who come in feeling like, I'm not sure that I can ever learn how to be a great writer, well, I got news for you too. You can, and what we do in this course will set you on the path to turning out great legal writing in lots of different contexts. We do lots of foundational stuff. We also get to talk about some of the fun, nuanced stuff. But this is really a foundational course, so it's not as though we expect you get to the end of this year and all of a sudden your writing is exemplary and you've mastered everything you need to know. But what we do is teach you not just what great legal writing is and get you on the path to learning it, but we also really emphasize what things you can do as you go through law school and your career to continue to reflect on and accept feedback about and improve your own writing. So you get lots of feedback in this course. You're going to get a lot of written feedback on drafts and rewrites of memos and motions and things you write. You're also going to get a lot of in-person feedback and coming in with the mindset of feedback is a gift. Whenever anybody spends time working with you on, and this is true not just in law school, but sort of in any sort of professional environment, anytime someone sits and really goes through a piece of writing you've produced to give you feedback on it, it's a gift because they are giving you the opportunity to improve. And this is something that I have to sometimes remind myself of when I have written something, for example, a scholarly article, and I've sent it off to a colleague to give me thoughts on, or to editors of a journal, and I kind of think, well, this is really good. I'm not sure even what they're going to find that they could recommend that I change. And then you get back a lot of different suggestions, and I will sometimes have the initial instinct to think, well, why did they think this wasn't clear? And then I kind of look at it and I say, oh, this wasn't clear. That's really, really good feedback. So it's helpful for all of us to remember that anytime someone sits with our writing and gives us their comments on it, it's an opportunity to grow and to improve. I think one mistake that a lot of students make coming into law school is when they think about how to apportion their time with respect to class work, is that they front load the work. In other words, they spend too much time thinking about the work they want to do before class. And I think this kind of goes back to the concern about not wanting to get something wrong in class. And then they don't spend much time at all after class reflecting on and reviewing what just happened in class, for 10 minutes looking over your notes. And then, once a week or every other week or at the end of a unit, kind of thinking about pulling together all the pieces. So if there is a class sort of preparation, a piece of advice I'd give to students, it would be to think about, if class is here and this is sort of the pre-class stuff, shift some of your work this way. So that you're doing more reflection after class, and maybe even if that means that you're able to do a little bit less preparation before class. Yeah, so let's talk about what happens in a law school classroom. I think, whether it's a cold call, and a cold call I think students tend to think of as, I'm walking into this class today and I have no idea whether I'm going to be someone who, a name that the professor calls out to talk about a case or something. But there are other kinds of things, there are other ways that some professors handle calling on students. So for example, I don't cold call in the sense that students have no idea if they're going to be called on. I actually tell my students, usually as class is beginning, here are the 6 students who I expect to call on today to talk about the cases I asked you to read, for example. But either way, I kind of get the sense that one reason that some students find that experience, whether it's a cold call or a panel system or whatever, nerve-wracking, is that they feel like their job in that moment when the professor calls on them is to perform, to prove that they have done the reading and understood it. And I think that that's completely the wrong way to think about what is happening in that moment when the professor is asking you, the student, some questions about the reading. It's not a performance. It's not about proving to the professor that you prepared for class. What I really view that conversation between me and a student, or sometimes a couple of students in a class, as being, it's learning, right? So if my students come to class and I call on some students and I ask a bunch of questions and every single student gets every question right, I should also sort of say that for lots of the questions I ask, it's not that there is a right answer, right? So sometimes what we're exploring, what are the strongest arguments for our client? What are the most significant facts in the set of material that our client brought to us? What are some themes that emerge from this case? But sometimes there is a right answer. And if I ask a bunch of questions and every student got the right answer for every question, then that wasn't a class that I've taught well. It wasn't a class I've prepared well, because no learning has taken place in that class. Really, when I talk to a student and ask them to, for example, tell me about the facts of a case that they've read, which is something that we do very early in the year, in the first semester, when students are just learning how to read cases, my expectation is that they will have missed things when they were reading, because they've never read cases before. When I say cases, I mean court opinions that judges have written. So of course I'm going to ask some questions about some of the things that the judge wrote. And the student may not have realized that that was an important part of the case, may have misunderstood what the judge said. And so what we do in that moment is I ask some questions that help draw out how I would approach the case so that the student can have the experience in class of doing it. When we do those things, when I ask questions and sometimes students struggle through the answers, that's where learning takes place, and that is a good class. And incidentally, if you're a student who doesn't get called on that day, you should also view that conversation that you're observing not as a performance, but as your opportunity to learn, by sort of putting yourself in that student's shoes and thinking through, how would I answer these questions? By focusing in on what is my professor really interested in about this case or set of materials or doctrine or what have you. But if students approach the class thinking that the thing that is supposed to happen in this 55 minutes or 75 minutes or whatever is we're all going to be in here learning hard material together, I think that hopefully dials down some of the nervousness around oh gosh, what if I get called on and I answer something and I get it wrong? So you get it wrong. Like, now you're going to learn something about how you can read the case differently next time and get it right. Well, since I'm a huge nerd about writing in general, I always have a book that I've got that's about writing, either what makes writing great. I'm super interested in what professional writers do in terms of their process. So not just lawyers, but journalists and all sorts of other people who write for a living. I spend some time reading what they write. But then sort of further afield from my day job, I'm a huge baseball nut, and specifically a huge Cardinals fan, because I grew up in St. Louis, so I'm a lifelong Cardinals fan. And so I read a ton about baseball, and I'm interested in everything from the stories about what happens on the field to how individual baseball players make decisions on the field, to the history of the game, to the history of the Cardinals, of course. I kind of like to come at it from every angle. And I also, my other sort of big nerdy reading hobby is food. And I think kind of like with baseball and with sports, I'm interested in approaching it from every angle. So I read about the history and the anthropology of what people have eaten and how they've eaten over time, what trends are, sort of interesting today and how people eat, what goes on in a restaurant kitchen. Kind of it all interests me. So at any given time, I may have a book in each of those categories, a baseball book, a food book, and a writing book sitting on my nightstand. Certainly outside the law school, Ann Arbor is a gem of a town. And no matter what your interests are, you'll find something that you enjoy doing. One thing I would strongly encourage all students to do if they have a chance is to explore some of the natural areas we have in town. We have a gorgeous arboretum. We have the Huron River, which kind of like winds its way through town. When the weather's nice, you can check out a kayak or a canoe or a paddle boat and spend some time there. We have a great food scene, lots of great restaurants, so find me in my email if you want recommendations. I'm happy to share my favorites. So whatever you want to do, you're going to find it here. And also, we go to Detroit a lot. Lots of fun stuff. Again, more food, more culture, more everything there. But you really don't even have to leave Ann Arbor for that. We get all sorts of amazing cultural performances here. We get the New York Philharmonic usually every other year, as often as that. And unlike going to see them in New York, here it's $5 to park and super easy to get in and out of Hill Auditorium. So everything everything that I really enjoy doing in big cities, I find that I can do in Ann Arbor, but it's much easier to do it here.